G'day guys, you've seen the name of the video so you know exactly what we're getting into today. Gonna keep it short and sweet, starting off with the negatives and ending on a good note. First negative, the tyre size. Now hopefully you can see there the real tight fit these standard 265 tyres have. Those tyres are 265 by 70, and when they're really low you will get a tiny little bit of scrubbing. So I know you can bash out your guards and all that jazz, but without any modifications then 265/70 is as big as you're going to be able to get. I'll show you the rear here as well. I've parked like this so you can sort of have a better look at it. But there really isn't a whole lot of spare room. Once you start deflating those and really maximizing the space in that guard, you're really going to struggle to fit anything much bigger. Especially if you get a good tread and a well-known and reputable tyre, that's going to do you the trick fine. Alright, moving along to number 2 of what I don't like about this car is the lack of GVM/GVM upgrades. So my model, the 2015, it came out initially with 2,750 with a few bits and bobs on it, full tank of fuel and a couple of people. You do end up sort of kind of getting pretty close to that. When I packed away from my trip through to the Simpson Desert, it was a bit of a strain to try and avoid maxing that out, having to carry an extra 40 to 60 litres of fuel, enough water and food and a whole bunch of other bits and bobs for that trip. It wasn't ideal. Now in terms of getting that upgraded, there's very few options. The only company that I see that will run you a GVM upgrade at the moment is a company, I think they're called Australian Suspension Specialists or something like that, and what their upgrade does is it boosts the total GVM by only 130 kilos, and it's going to cost you about 4,000 bucks. So I don't really see that as being a worthwhile option. It's not really increasing a whole lot for you, and it's going to cost you a lot in your back pocket. Trying to tow something behind this while being fully loaded is going to cause you a bit of dramas. You actually do need to pay attention and be specific about what you're packing and how. Alright, moving on to number 3 is the boot, or the boot space/size. Generally the boots of wagons are alright, but they're not going to be anywhere near as the capacity of a ute tray. With this one here, it is a little bit maybe underdeveloped. There's no split. For instance, I had a Nissan Pathfinder R51 that separated the glass so you could reach in, grab whatever you needed without actually opening up the tailgate. It was perfect for when I had the rear bar on that car. You didn't need to unpin it all and slap it back. It was just a convenience factor and it made life a bit easier. Whereas here, you've only got the one button that brings the whole thing up. Now, I'm running a 95 litre fridge, Waco, on a kick-ass slide, and it barely fits. Alright, so hopefully you can see that, but there's not a whole lot of spare room. There's maybe like 5 centimeters, 6 centimeters between the back of the fridge and the second row. And it's the exact same story with the drawers. They fit in there, but it's pretty tight. I ended up having to make a false floor, bolted that in and bolted this stuff on top of it so it doesn't move anywhere. But when you look at it now, there is a bit of a lack of room. Sure, you've got your wings, you know, you could find some way to go about getting that a bit more efficient. On this side here, I've got my accessory box and my solar regulator so I can see what's going on there. I've also added in a shelf to kind of give me something else to put my stuff on, probably dirty recovery gear or stuff like wet clothes or a pillow, something like that, just to keep it off whatever you load on here, because ideally on top of the fridge it's wasted space. If you're going to be getting in and out of the fridge, you can't have stuff hanging off it. Not the best, you know, overall capacity, but it does the trick, I guess. Now, moving on to number 4 of what I dislike, we've got the fuel tank, the fuel capacity, and the fuel gauge. So you go to fill up your car, you pump it until the nozzle clicks, you put it, hook it up, go pay, jump in the car and it says it's full. But the thing is, it says it's full and the dial doesn't move until about 60 to 80 kilometers down the track. So gauge is up at full and you don't really actually know how much you've used until the gauge starts going down. It's the exact same when you get to the end. So it tells you, hey, you've got 0 range, refill, you know, and then you've still actually got about 100 kilometers, give or take, of range left in the tank. Now, I know why they do that, and I get all that sort of stuff, but personally, I would much prefer that the gauge is actually accurate. Now, moving on to number 5 of what I don't like. It is the gosh darn terrible infotainment unit that the Toyotas in 2015 came with. It is garbage. It literally, the only thing it can be used for is to play Bluetooth music, because it has a garbage interface, it has almost 0 features, doesn't have navigation, doesn't have Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. It's effectively a music player that you could get 20 years ago and stick in a double DIN unit. I've since gone and gotten mine upgraded. It's just a Kenwood, I think it was about $1,000. Now that that's all over and done with, let's get cracking with the positives. So the first positive I like about the Fortuner is every single Fortuner comes standard with a rear diff lock. Having the diff lock there at a push of a button makes life super easy. You don't need to get any air compressors fitted, none of that business. It's all there, ready to go, and it actually works pretty well. For a factory piece, it actually works pretty well. Now, that leads me onto number 2. Coming straight off that note, this whole car is a little bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's basically a Toyota Hilux with a shorter wheelbase, bit of a different grille, but it performs almost exactly the same. You've got solid axle in the rear with coils, it's comfortable, it can flex when it needs to, and it tears it up on the track, especially once you lock that diff in. It's actually an incredibly capable vehicle, and most people never would have thought of that until they actually see it out there, because generally the tuners, you know, they get a bit of a rap about being car park queens and taking their kids to school and all that kind of jazz. But end of the day, it's a tremendously capable vehicle, and you'd never really know just by looking at it. Number 3 is it's a whole sort of combination. You can call it whatever you want, but we're going to be looking at the engine, the badge. End of the day, it's still a Toyota. It carries a lot over from the Hilux, that being an engine that is more or less reliable, fuel efficient if you know how to plot it around like I do. I put up a picture of my fuel economy this morning after about 10 minutes out on the road. That all means that if you need parts, they're going to be pretty cheap. If you're remote, it's not going to be too difficult to find. The service network is probably the biggest in Australia of any car company, and you're going to get looked after, and your car's going to be able to get repaired generally, even in the most remote towns. Building onto that, talking about usability, it also comes with a quote-unquote throttle controller. So it has an eco button and a power button, and all that basically does is just change the throttle response a little bit, change the throttle map. And so in eco, you can just plod along, it kind of does its thing. Seems a little bit gutless, but it is what it is. It's not using a whole lot of the available power. In power mode though, you really do get seemingly, and I'd say seemingly, a little bit more power and a little bit more responsiveness from the throttle. And on top of everything else, that's going to save you a few $100 from having to buy an aftermarket throttle controller. Number 4, we have cup holders. So I love these cup holders. They're actually huge. You can fit over a litre in there and it's secure, it's not going to bump around. This is the exact same on the passenger side and in the second row. There is also a second cup holder and then two more in the middle. So the front row has 6 cup holders just by itself. And on top of that, even the third row has cup holders either side. Alright, while we're here, we can just add a quick little bonus negative, is these headlights. They are actually garbage, they're like candles. It's difficult to replace them because the light sensor is very, I guess, sensitive. And it's been not recommended to do by a few people. So if you're planning on going out in the country and doing a whole bunch of long driving, definitely recommend some spotties or a light bar. The last positive for this video is the overall price of these cars. So they're cheaper than the Toyota Hilux, and you also pay less annually for insurance and registration because they're not a ute. If you are a little bit of a penny pincher, that's definitely something of note. Alright guys, well there you have it. That's my 5 likes and 5 dislikes about the mighty BluTuna. Let me know in the comments if you think there's something I've maybe gotten wrong or missed something that's blatantly obvious. Maybe it's something that I've just gotten used to. This hasn't been a review by any means. I'll probably do a bit more of an in-depth review about the car a bit down the track once it's completely finished. That way I only really have to do the one. Hopefully you found it somewhat informative, and I'll see you on the next one.